Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here, Brian over there. It's September 11th, Brian. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I guess it's a somber occasion for many reasons.
Yeah. Of course, September 10th is the day that Mr. Charlie Kirk met his fate out in Utah. And the video was amongst the most shocking I've ever seen. How about you? You must have seen, Brian, the up-close video with the gaping hole in Charlie's neck.
I guess the footage I've seen is blurred out. But yeah, you got like shot in the neck.
Oh, dear. Well, I think to set the stage for this podcast, I will pull up the actual footage on my phone, and I'll show it to you right now.
All right.
Yeah, it's, man. Are you sure you want to see that? If you're thinking you don't want to see it or you want to avoid it, that is a reasonable stance to have. It's one of the worst things you can possibly see. But if you're curious, let's go for it.
I don't know. I wasn't really curious, I guess.
Are you trying to protect your delicate brain from horrific images?
I don't know. I guess I wasn't like trying to seek it out. You seem like you want to show it to me.
It's a hell of a video, but I don't want to show it to anyone who isn't sure they want to see gore. It's brutally gory. So yeah, I mean, you don't seem like, yes, I want to see it, so I'm not going to try to shove it down your throat here, but the video really sent a shiver down my spine. It was absolutely brutal. Obviously, Mr. Kirk is sitting there talking about, his many issues, one of his many issues, and a shot rings out, and it goes right through his trachea, and it just off-center in his neck there. And he must have lost a third of his blood in just the first split second alone. Just blood pours out of his neck as you can just see that the man is killed. His hands come up in a way that suggests that his his spinal cord or his neurological system is screwed, and he just collapses over sideways. His bodyguards jump on top of him. Someone pinches off his, presumably his carotid artery, or his what's the vein? His jugular vein, whichever one was spurting, or maybe both. And I guess he died en route to the hospital, or maybe at the hospital. Absolutely crazy video. I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, it is. It's a tough one, and it does feel very somber. I mean, I don't know. I don't really like Charlie Kirk's opinions or his views, but like his idea of being shot down is the idea of someone being shot down. Yeah, like a couple of contrasts. Like I remember seeing a clip of Charlie Kirk saying that if he had a 10-year-old daughter and she got raped and she got pregnant, that he would want the child delivered because he's against abortion. And you're like, oh, this seems like a crazy opinion, But then in the heat of debate, people say crazy things which maybe they would want to walk back if you interviewed them after the fact. Maybe that's one of those things. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things that I have said on this very podcast that maybe looking back, I would want to revise or nuance or something like that. But then there's also, he would also always say the thing Kirk would about, if we can't talk to each other, then violence becomes the only alternative. And so it's absolutely gut-wrenching that this man got shot down, with his wife and his 2-year-old and 4-month-old in attendance in front of the world. Oh, what an absolutely dark chapter in American history this is.
Well, he was talking about how, some amount of gun deaths are acceptable to protect Second Amendment rights at the time of speaking, which is like crazily ironic. But I'd have to imagine that I don't know. He probably doesn't change his opinion getting shot.
That's one opinion I agree with. Like, do I think that alcohol should be banned? No. Does that mean I want people to be hit by drunk drivers? Well, I regret that drunk driving accidents happen, but I don't think the solution is for the government to come in and ban alcohol outright. So I don't know. That seems like a perfectly cogent point. I've seen that quote or whatever attributed to Kirk.
Well, it's a wild time to get shot in any case. About your opinion regarding the abortion there, I mean, I think you'd have to actually be in the situation to it'd be crazy if the situation actually happened and he stuck to his guns in that regard. I mean, that'd be more meaningful if you've actually gone through the situation than merely philosophizing ahead of time.
Right. No one would actually ask their 10-year-old daughter to bear a child to term and is their rapist's child. But that's crazy talk. Now, come on. You can't be serious. But maybe he was. And if he does, then I disagree with the man vehemently. But, man, my heart breaks seeing him bleeding out on stage like that. Absolutely rough. Ugh. I mean, I just feel there's a lot to say about this. let's maybe start with the Donald and his comments. The Wall Street Journal noted this morning that the Donald went through the list of all of the recent violence where it was like a lefty type attacking righty types, like this incident, but glosses over when it's vice versa, when it's like a right-wing type shooting lefty types. So I'm like, not loving the commentary from the Donald on this front, but I also just feel like the idea that the Donald is some unique and terrible threat, or that this is what I hear from everyone everyone in my entire friend group. It's like everyone that I know, everyone who's a peer, has this opinion that like the Donald is like a uniquely bad politician, and that the Donald is like the disease rather than one of the many symptoms of what's going on here. And so I do feel like, even though I don't love the Donald, fanning the flames of this fire or whatever, I still feel like thinking of the Donald as some kind of unique threat. Like, it is true that the Donald does virtually everything he does, I might disagree with, like sending, ramping up immigration enforcement, things like this. But I mean, I also vehemently disagree with the Patriot Act, and that's something that is a very authoritarian, sort of piece of legislation that got passed long before the Donald was ever on the political scene. Things like this. I think that the idea that the Donald represents some kind of unique threat is it's like what Reddit believes, right? Like, this is the consensus on Reddit that the Donald is the next Hitler, right? And I just feel like that comparison has really led to in my mind, we have no idea who the shooter is. The FBI today, Kash Patel's FBI, released a picture of like a college-age dude dressed all in black. They said they found the .30 caliber hunting rifle in the woods nearby to the event, and that there was one unspent shell. There was one unspent shell casing still inside the rifle. Usually the rifles eject those, and then there was 3 other rounds, lined up behind it, and these bullets had like pro-trans, anti-fascist slogans scrawled on them, much like Luigi Mangione's bullet had some kind of a screed written on it. But we don't really know anything about the shooter right now. Presumably, I have to assume that this is someone who has come to believe that, he's probably been on that TP, Toilet Paper USA subreddit that's anti-Charlie Kirk, and has probably bought into this idea that the Donald is a unique threat, and that the Democrats are, if we could just get another Democrat in office, then everything would be all right. Or if we could defeat the Donald, then everything would be all right. Puerile speculation on my part. We got no idea who has really perpetrated this thing yet, but it is, as I mentioned, Thursday, September 11th. Incident happened yesterday on Wednesday, September 10th. And this podcast will be going live on Monday, which is going to be September the 15th. So by the time you're hearing this, you, the listener, probably there'll be a lot more information, and we're kind of flying blind at this point. But this idea that the Donald is like the Donald is the problem, and versus the Donald being a symptom of a much broader problem. I think, until we get evidence to the contrary, we have to assume that factored into this ridiculous assassination in some way, shape, or form. Any disagreement there, Brian? Is there anything you're seeing that I'm not seeing here?
Well, it seems to be on the social media a lot of celebration of Charlie Kirk's death.
Ugh, yeah, absolutely horrifying. That is really a sad testament to the terminus that we now find ourselves as a country, eh?
Well, you can see in the footage some guy is like excited when he gets shot immediately afterwards.
Yeah, I saw another video of someone with a microphone talking about how delighted they were, like they had a megaphone. They were speaking into it, talking about to some crowd, talking about how delighted they were that Kirk had been shot to some young kid. That's brutal. That is just ugly. The guy who was there at the event, who you could see cheering in the front row or like the third row or whatever, I'll chalk that up to shock, maybe. That is just the ugliest side of humanity.
Well, there's just something going on where, like, Trumpism has people responding to it by, losing their mind completely. Yes. And, I don't know, debasing themselves, or I don't know.
If you believe that the Donald was the next Hitler, I think the rational thing to do would be to get a long rifle and set up on top of the grassy knoll, right? that seems like a logical progression. The question is, why do you think Donald's the next Hitler? And that would be thanks to the media, no?
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. So just moving through my list of notes here. I think, it is so, this thing happened like 24 hours ago, and so it's easy to overreact to what's happened, but Konstantin Kisin, the buffoon on Substack, whose essay sometimes come my way, he had this essay that came, and one of his quotes here is, quote, "Tonight feels like some sort of invisible line has been crossed that we didn't even know was there." Agree or disagree?
Well, it's hard to tell what the fallout will be. I just don't know what's gonna change. There were some other assassination attempts on the Donald in the past, but they weren't successful. Yeah. So it's all quite a bit more real.
This feels different to me, to answer my own unfair question, because it's literally 24 hours. How can you have any perspective on this thing? So it is not a great question for me to ask you. But to me, Charlie Kirk was a dude who, he wasn't a political figure or a powerful CEO or part of the, he was adjacent to, but not part of the apparatus. So this felt like new territory to me. Seem crazy to you? When I just looking through the list of previous targets, there's obviously the Donald's assassination attempt last summer in Butler, Pennsylvania, a second one down in Mar-a-Lago, or one of those golf courses in South Florida. Remember the Secret Service apprehended some lunatic who was camped out in the bushes. So there's that. There's the Steve Scalise thing, where Steve Scalise, who was then the House minority leader or majority leader, I can't remember what was the state of play in 2017. But anyway, the politician Steve Scalise got shot down, and 3 other people at the congressional baseball practice or something like that. You remember this incident? I think Scalise is still trying to recover to this day. He didn't die, but he got horribly injured by getting shot. Ugh. There's, of course, Luigi Mangione and his assassination of a CEO in the streets of Manhattan, and then a secondary incident where some man, the media tells us that the man was there because he had CTE from the NFL he never played in and wanted to attack executives from the NFL, but who was one of these big companies? Blackstone had their offices in the same building. So you're one of these companies that's deranging life in America, much like the United Healthcare CEO that Luigi Mangione shot down. Right, this is another incident of a gunman, either attacking the NFL or Blackstone or BlackRock. BlackRock is the company that is the huge fund that owns all these other companies, and Blackstone is the company that manipulates the rental prices, right? It's that one. It's not BlackRock is the company. I forgot the name of the man who runs BlackRock, but he has that big computer system called Aladdin that can project risk into the future. And Blackstone and Citibank and State Street and Vanguard are the 3 big funds that own all virtually all of America, all of the American economy. But this is Blackstone, the one involved in all the rental shenanigans and the buying up of residential properties for investment purposes. Then, of course, we've got the incident in Minnesota a couple months ago where a bunch of state lawmakers were shot down by a deranged gunman. Then there's the 2 staffers to the Israeli embassy 7 weeks ago. They got shot down. You remember this? And then, of course, I put the Charlotte stabbing of last weekend on here, but that's really more of a random act. This doesn't belong in the same category as these political assassinations, right? It's just an act of random violence, I guess. But in all of the incidents except the Charlotte one, it does seem like at least the people getting attacked were either they were part of the political apparatus or part of the Wall Street apparatus that's crushing this country under its boot. So those didn't have this. Those are all examples of deranged people, and you don't just because someone. The Donald may be making odious remarks in the wake of the Charlie Kirk shooting, but we don't wish physical harm on the Donald, or at least At least I don't. But it does feel like the shooting down a commentator like Charlie Kirk, he's like a YouTube personality, right? What is this thing? He goes to the liberal colleges, he sets up a big tent that says like debate me or prove me wrong or whatever, and then he actually engages with people. I mean, that is just... It does feel like it crosses a new Rubicon, I suppose. Rubicon, of course, the fabled stream that Julius Caesar had to step over. That was supposed to be the boundary, but it was like illegal to march on Rome with your army. But Julius Caesar said, well, either I march on Rome with my army, or I am disarmed by the Senate, or I'm going to be captured by the Senate. And I don't have much choice. The oligarchy was after Julius Caesar because he had some funny ideas about land reform, and he was a populare, or a political representative, of the working people. Again, it does feel like a line has been crossed, like a Rubicon has been crossed. And so I got a excerpt from Mr. Daryl Cooper's tweet from last night, and he says, "The messages I'm getting from very moderate, almost apolitical normie friends and relatives tells me that the combination of the Charlotte bus murder and the assassination of Charlie pushed through a barrier of some kind. I'm talking hairdresser aunts who've never said a political word to me, who wouldn't flinch if Trump shut down MSNBC and threw left-wing billionaires into Guantanamo. People have had enough, and this is the regime's last chance to keep the response official." Ominous tweet there from Mr. Daryl Cooper.
Well, what does that mean? Keep the response official?
I think to maintain, there's their last chance to get control of the situation, to impose control of the situation before all hell breaks loose. That's how I interpreted it. I think, I guess anyone's interpretation is valid, but yeesh, pretty grim words from Mr. Daryl Cooper there.
Well, probably wager on all hell breaking loose.
Yeah, me too. I don't see like the So I want to get into like what's really going on here in America. What is, I called the Donald a symptom rather than a disease. 5-10 minutes ago. What is the disease that's eating away at the heart of American society? And I think it's no mystery, right? This is the System Failure Podcast. What do we talk about all the time? Economics. I think this is fundamentally an economics thing. Now, I may be, just because that's my bailiwick, I may be seeing my own pet issue in this thing, but I really don't think so. See, we talked about abortion a few minutes ago, Charlie Kirk's, wild views on abortion. But abortion, to me, it's not a real political issue. It's a convenient football. I think most people have an ethical intuition that, if your 10-year-old daughter got raped and happened to be knocked up from the rapist, and then you're talking about, a couple days after the event, or a couple of weeks, you're talking about a cluster of cells that doesn't really resemble a human yet. And that would be an easy call for me to be like, yeah, let's just, we'll, take some pills, abort that thing. Let's not carry this pregnancy to term.
You would think.
But on the other hand, if the child was a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from being delivered, I would have a much harder time, right? So what I'm saying here is that my ethical intuition about when abortion goes from being permissible to not so permissible is somewhere, in the second trimester maybe. I don't know. It's somewhere in between conception and delivery. And I think that for 99% of us, maybe Charlie Kirk and his fellow Christian zealots excluded, right? Maybe they would really feel like conception is the proper, goalpost here. But I think for the overwhelming majority of us, our ethical intuition is going to put us somewhere between conception and delivery. I just think that that makes the abortion issue the world's most convenient political football. I think on this podcast before, we've compared the abortion issue to sending in an aged quarterback like Joe Flacco. You don't want to retire Joe Flacco, right? Obama ran on codifying abortion in 2008, matriculated to the presidency with possession of both houses of Congress, and then said, well, we got other things to worry about now. We're not going to codify, Roe v. Wade or even talk about it again. It was just some talking point to get the man elected and not something that they actually wanted to follow through on. Why? Because you don't want to retire Aaron Rodgers, right? You want to have him on the sideline ready to go in when you really need him. And so what I'm saying here is that abortion is a wedge issue, something that you can use to energize debate within a very narrow parameters. Maybe another way of talking about this is thinking back to the Occupy Wall Street years. when people were camped out in Zuccotti Park and were, extremely angry that the banks had all gotten themselves nice bailouts on the backs of the U.S. taxpayer, right? Like, these people had been irresponsible. They had run their businesses fraudulently, and they failed upward, right? They just get a huge bailout from the rest of us. And the rage from that was something to behold in like 2010, 2011. And then we started hearing about, I remember, was it 11 or 10 when gay marriage got legalized in Maine? I remember being really excited about that particular political cause, and it just felt like they took that blueprint. They could see that people were energized about the idea of marriage equality, and it feels like the media apparatus, the Democrats, the Republicans, everyone like took that issue and just blew it up into this major thing that we have spent the last 15 years going round and round and round about. But what I notice is that it conveniently diverts attention away from the fact that the banks are scamming us all. And so that really gets to the heart of what I think is going on here. I think you've got to look up, right? I think the wet dream of the banks is to have the one faction of the working class fighting another faction of the working class, and no one realizes that we're all having our lunches eaten for us by the banking houses. That's exactly what's going on here. So there's like first it was all about outsourcing jobs. In the post-World War II era, first it was about like outsourcing jobs overseas and firing domestic workers en masse and busting unions. That was all a part of it. And then there's the buying up of like the Democratic Party, like the Clintons. I forgot the name of their organization that pioneered taking political donations from like corporate. With the collapse of labor unions, who previously funded the Democratic Party, you had to have corporate donors fund the Democratic Party instead. And that was the Clintons, great pioneering feat. They managed to they managed to start taking donations from the same people who furnished the Republican Party with their campaign contributions. And then after that, you have the buying up of them. So you have the buying up of like all of our politicians, and then like the buying up of all of our media. And in that way, they've really tried to control the discourse. And what have they done with their control of the discourse? They have pitted us against each other to where poor Charlie Kirk is getting shot down out in Utah. And that, I think, is the real source of the chaos. What do you think? Am I missing anything here, Brian?
Well, I just don't think that Charlie Kirk was probably gunned down by, some like bleeding heart, like a leftist or something.
What's an alternative? I mean, clearly we're if he wasn't gunned down by a leftist, we're meant to think that he was. Certainly agree with that, eh?
Well, it just seems like an assassination.
Yeah.
And so it seems like it seems like a professional killing. And so I guess maybe someone got enraged enough by his podcast. Certainly the reaction, like online, I guess would support that people harbor this kind of opinion. Although the thing is that the opinions online are always crazy and not like grounded in reality. So I don't know, but it probably is going to usher in an era of nothing ever good comes from these things like 9/11 and his acts of terrorism. There's like after 9/11 there was some like kumbaya among people, and some kindness was expressed towards one another, and then that was quickly leveraged into a lengthy war on terror and the aforementioned Patriot Act and a lot of waterboarding and whatnot.
Torture programs, extrajudicial renderings, things of this nature. Yikes. Well, okay, so either let's say that the two we may be missing some options here in our futile speculation, but either this man. Either the assassin was like a deranged leftist, or he was someone acting as if they were deranged leftists. Would you agree with this framing?
Yes.
Yeah, so in either case, either this is a part of sowing discord amongst the middle and lower classes, or this is the discord amongst the middle and lower classes. Then. But in either case, we can still see that there's much more going on here than meets the eye, right? There's much more to this assassination than just I mean, there's a whole. Either way, we're connecting this to economics, right? Like, what is the like if in fact the assassin was a professional? I mean, it's a 200-yard shot with a 30 cal. That's a pretty good shot. Is it an elite shot? I don't really know. I don't know enough about firearms to judge that. But it seems like I mean, I've been to the range. 200 yards is a substantial range. That's a tough. I mean,
yeah. Well, to do a sniper shot across 2 football fields, you have to like control your breathing, right? And probably like breathe on the exhale and like.
Yeah, you're well within range of having to do that at 200 yards.
I mean, there are some people who could certainly execute that shot flawlessly, but it's certainly not. Just I don't know, your average, I don't know, pot-bellied leftist or whatever with dyed hair or whatnot.
I would imagine that you would have to spend the summer practicing in order to make a shot like that. And you would have to be at the range with some consistency. And you'd really have to, and you'd have to not be super nervous or have the adrenaline pumping too hard. So I mean, yeah, it definitely seems like a really good shot. So that's suspect. But I don't think that if the assassination was some kind of false flag, let's say, like where they want us to believe. Like I mentioned the bullets found in the woods, inside the rifle in the woods. If we're to believe that this was all some kind of a false flag, well, that would seem like it really lends a lot more credence to my whole contention that this business is based in economics. Or would you disagree? Like suppose, let's just grant that it's true that this is some kind of a false flag. If that's true, who do you reckon would be behind it? What's your theory?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I guess I just want to tangle the other end of the argument for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
That like maybe this assassination. I mean, it kind of does like bring shame, or I don't know. It's kind of bad. It's not going to support that the Trump is Hitler narrative because I mean, Trump supporters aren't out there assassinating people for the most part. Although I suppose there is that dude bonking Nancy Pelosi's husband on the head with a hammer.
Pelosi took a shot to the dome.
But I mean, it's not just like going out there and gunning down like left-wing political commentators. I don't believe are getting gunned down, and so maybe the backlash, like maybe people realize that this insane political discourse online has gone too far, and we need to stop spamming the Joe Rogan subreddit every time he has Dave Smith on or anyone else not doing like a mainstream brand of politics. Although the immediate initial reaction would indicate that that's not the case. Although, I don't know, but you do have people like calling for cooler heads to prevail. Like anyone who's like not out of their mind online seems to be doing that. So,
well, the Reddit is a good example. Like the Joe Rogan subreddit, like what percentage of those, utterly insane comments on that subreddit are bots? Right? It's got to be the majority bots. Right? I mean, I would guess it's like 80% bots, but I have no idea. That's just my feeling.
I don't know. Like if you go in and click on these accounts, which I do sometimes, because I just can't believe it. Like every time that people are upset that like when Tim Dillon came on, people were up. I mean, he's going to go do a show in Saudi Arabia, and there's all this outrage that Tim Dillon would go and perform a show in Saudi Arabia. And I don't know. I can't imagine like actually, like it's like some kind of weird fake outrage. And so maybe it is bots. But if you click on these accounts, they seem like real people like posting in subreddits of their whatever interests them and whatnot. So I don't know. But to go back to your earlier question, though, if someone did assassinate Charlie Kirk, I don't know. Well, I probably like some kind of lizard person, right? Or reptilian overlord. The same people who assassinate everyone, and generally, like whoever is responsible for letting 9/11 happen. Which I don't know. That's a touchy conspiracy topic in 2025. I see that. No, it's on 9/11. We're talking about 9/11. Yeah, I mean, but Tucker's putting out like a documentary about all the crazy things about 9/11. Including Building 7 and how the CIA like knew that these terrorists were in the country and pretty much what they were up to, but didn't notify the FBI. And there's all kinds of crazy things about 9/11.
Well, that's not. 1898, Spanish-American War. The USS Maine is blown up in Havana Harbor under deeply suspicious circumstances. 1914, right? You have like the Zimmermann telegraph. Remember this incident with the Zimmermann telegraph? It was a fake telegram from the German Empire to the Mexicans, encouraging them to attack the U.S. And this telegram was presented on the floor of Congress as a reason why we should join World War I. Later, we had the Lusitania. Our actual entry into World War I was precipitated by the sinking of the Lusitania, a Cunard Line ship that was illegally carrying war material, right? And like when that ship left, like the German Chancellery took out a full-page ad in the New York Times begging people not to book passage on the Lusitania. It is illegally carrying war material and subject to sinking by German U-boats, and that's exactly what happened. And then I forgot the name of the memo. Oh, man. There's a memo that demonstrates that the Roosevelt administration had foreknowledge of the attack on Pearl Harbor, right? The memo is essentially, it's from like some general or something. And it's essentially saying, what we got to do is cut off the Japanese oil supply and force them to attack us, so we'll have a casus belli to enter World War II. And that's exactly what we did. We slapped an oil embargo on the Japanese Empire that left them no strategic choice but to start to come to Pearl Harbor and start trying to sink U.S. warships. And, oh, by the way, the carrier groups just happened to be out at sea and were not subject to attack that day. They're critical carriers. We didn't risk the carriers in the Pearl Harbor sinking. And then, of course, there's the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which now the government straight up admits didn't really happen, that precipitated our entry into Vietnam. And so when you think about the terror wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc., it's like, was the casus belli suspicious, or was this like the first war in U.S. history where there wasn't some fugazi to get us into these wars? I don't know. There's General Wesley Clark's list of 7 countries, of course, that he famously talks about, pre 9/11, where we, depending on, already had plans to go into these, Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. The list. Sorry, what were you going to say there, Brian?
Let's see. What was I going to say?
Well, you were talking about 9/11 and, the fact that 9/11 might have been that everything about 9/11 is not quite on the up and up.
Well, I mean, to talk about MK Ultra for a second, it seems, if you looking at the reaction online in any case, and then, it seems, just seeing the reaction of that guy after Charlie Kirk gets shot, who's like cheering. I mean, you have to say that the MK Ultra is like worked. People have lost their mind.
Yeah, and MK Ultra, of course, is the CIA program when our intelligence services found out that the Russians, the Soviet Union, was looking into mind control techniques. They felt that they had to also look into mind control techniques to keep pace, and this involved in the involuntarily dosing of U.S. citizens with drugs like LSD. And, I think I said it last week, but the last time we got a look into the books of the intelligence services was 1975 with the Church Committee hearings. We haven't heard much about it since, but MK Ultra was one of the horrific things we found out about. And you're saying that, MK Ultra is on full display here in the response to the Charlie Kirk shooting. That sounds like what you're saying.
Well, the number of people who just seem excited that Charlie Kirk has been shot, or otherwise are just expressing contempt for Charlie Kirk immediately after being shot, seems crazy. Mm-hmm. Now, although to some extent, though, to get upset about people's online reaction to things, though, probably is to fall for the MK Ultra is the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like Reddit is nothing but a den of MK Ultra, or like, it's filled with bot farms intended to influence public opinion. That's for sure.
And to be fair for the case for the human race, I mean, I went the whole day and didn't hear anyone, no one celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk in person. So maybe it's mostly an online phenomenon, and there's just like a few lunatics out there, and the bot farms are, for some reason, want to sow discord. Although, so they do want to sow discord online for the very reasons that you were just talking about, just the dissolution of that 99% movement, the crushing of the Tower of Babel is the most important thing to our reptilian overlords, right?
We can't have common accord amongst the working classes. They'll team up and outnumber the property owning classes that exploit them.
Well, one thing that I was thinking about prior to Charlie Kirk getting shot, right, is I don't know if you've ever heard about like these FEMA camps, right? Like this is something that Alex Jones talked about and Jesse Ventura. There's like these YouTube videos about these FEMA camps, which appear to be places to mass incarcerate like the American population, basically, or lock them up. And like, so why would that happen, right? Or during the COVID, they everyone got locked down, and then you could, I don't know, it seems like you could really see the MK Ultra in effect, right? If you're not with the establishment, then like you're hated. They create where you just see your fellow man as like as vermin, basically. And so, like, what are these lockdowns about, or like why would these FEMA camps be activated? And well, I mean, I think that the Epstein narrative is basically they have to protect the truth about Epstein cannot get out, right? Is what it comes down
and
to.
The truth about Epstein is,
well, that we don't know. That's the question, right? I mean, well, certainly part of the truth would appear to be, he has like a blackmail ring for political reasons on our politicians. But as we've talked about many times, it's obviously bigger than that because it permeates the university system. And it probably has something to do with the UFOs and why in Egypt, they don't want to accept any other narrative other than that these pyramids are a giant tomb. There's some kind of crazy truth out there that has to be kept under wraps. I mean, it's the truth that all the sheep, in like the farm that are being, cultivated to go to slaughter. I mean, it's the truth. You have to keep those sheep from finding out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'd probably this assassination. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that like normal people would go on a rooftop and try to assassinate Charlie Kirk. Although it is crazy the way that some people are seemingly excited about this. But maybe that's like manufactured and well, the MK Ultra is already pretty replete, as was the point I was just trying to make there. So yeah, I guess that's my feeling.
I've seen. Without naming names, I just remember the day that Trump was shot in Butler, PA. Yeah, I do remember. Someone I know laughing, thinking this was a great thing because they had just been conditioned to believe that Donald's Hitler. And if the Donald's Hitler, then his assassination is a cause for celebration, right? That just makes sense, But I remember myself feeling aghast at this turn in history that took place in Butler, PA, last summer. And I was amazed that someone could be so brainwashed, that someone could have that reaction to a living human, being shot at. Even if it's like Hitler, I mean, I do feel like what we want is like due process, and like proper protocols and things like that versus unhinged assassinations. So I do think that I don't think it's all fake. I think that a lot of people have been driven to utter madness by the media apparatus and the social media apparatus in tandem. And I think that whether this is really an assassination attempt by an unhinged lefty, or it belongs in all the world's a stage, and the men and women merely players. Each one has their entrance and their exit, and one player in his time plays many parts. Right, the Shakespeare quote. Like if this fits into that, all the world's a stage. Either way, I mean, it does seem like the layers of manipulation. It's like Eric Weinstein talks about those layers of reality and kayfabe. You have strata. You have a layer of reality and a layer of fakery, and another layer of reality, and another layer of fakery. And like when you watch the the WWE, as it was remonikered like 25 years ago, I still have trouble.
It's that World Wildlife Fund messing things up for you.
We should have had the World Wildlife Fund change their name, because when I was a kid, it was a WWF. But it really makes for compelling watching, because you never quite know where the kayfabe ends and the reality begins, and you never quite know where the kayfabe ends and the reality begins. I meant to say it both ways there. I think I said it the same way, but you know what I'm saying. It's hard to tell the difference between kayfabe and reality. And I think that has been a huge part of keeping us all asleep, so we don't realize we're being fleeced like the sheep you just mentioned. I agree that the Epstein thing is definitely to the fore here. I think that the Epstein thing is evidence of a larger structure, that exists above our head, above our nation states, our Westphalian nation states, and that the farmers are doing everything they can to keep the blinders on us and make sure we don't gain a line of sight into those structures of power that exist over the head of someone like the Donald. This must fit into that somehow.
Well, one thing is, I mean, just to be clear, like if you're like a sheep on a farm, I mean, there's the truth that your masters are raising you for slaughter, but like the truth of the world is so much more than that, right? I mean, that's just such like a low level that just doesn't encapsulate like the whole nature of human society and our aeroplanes and our internet and our human interactions and all that. There's just so much going on that these sheep like can't fathom at all, right? So, I mean, the Epstein, like, there's the veil being held over our eyes, and just the truth above that is like it's so much. I just imagine it's just a whole galaxy of stuff we can't possibly comprehend. So I don't know. I'm sure it's a big world out there once you take off the veil, and I'm sure that there's a lot going on behind the veil of Oz, and I could live with that, except for the part where the wealthy elite. Now I'm talking here about people that own property for a living. Like this is not high earners. High earners are great. We want high earners to live in the best houses and have the best lives because they're the most motivated and productive people, right? This is not that. This is people who get money by dint of owning property, right? They don't do any work at all. It's just that they owned the property yesterday, so they get to collect today. And that class has been just like it all goes back to the business plot of the 1930s, right? After the Gilded Age, the situation in America got so crazy during the Gilded Age. You had like bomb throwing anarchists, and in Russia you had the 1917 revolution. Like this is across the board, right? You have like the Industrial Revolution running its course, and the response to that, it was like the great. It's like you had the revolutions of 1848 in Europe, and the rise of Marxist ideology. And the Marxist idea that the capitalist system has a countdown clock built into it, a countdown to its own destruction, because each and every business owner will be motivated to fire their employees and replace them with technology. But then once they do that, the same business owners will no longer be able to sell their goods and services because the employees that they fired are other people's customers, and other capitalists have fired their customers, right? So it's like there's a contradiction there. And it's like the tendency of capitalism is to pool money into ever shrinking number of hands, and that just flies in the face of any sort of democratic process. So you have to have the fugazi, you have to have the scam on, you have to fool people, and so facing the monumental collapse of the capitalist economic system in the 1930s, it was FDR's idea that we can either switch economic systems like the Russians, or we can simply tax the rich to extend the runway of the capitalist system, to extend its longevity, to make it more sustainable. And that's exactly what he did, with the New Deal. And of course, I've ballyhooed about it many times in this very program. But the amendment, the constitutional amendment to create the New Deal, was called like the Soak the Rich Act because it soaked the rich. Roosevelt was from one of these New York Knickerbocker families, old New York families. He knew all of the robber barons. They were his family friends. And he wrote in his diary, the point of this New Deal business is to preserve the private system. I think the exact words is that he writes are like, if we had wanted to bring about the end of the capitalist system, we had but to fold our arms and wait, But the response to the New Deal, where the New Deal is expensive, right? You've got unemployment insurance for the first time, Social Security, massive public works projects like the Hoover Dam, the Golden Gate Bridge, right? This costs a pretty penny. That's some serious coin. And the way they're going to get it is by soaking the rich. And they were so opposed to it that they initiated the business plot, in which the who's who of the American Prescott Bush is going to be one of these, with the patriarch of the Bush family is going to be one of these guys. And but they made their fatal mistake, in approaching 4-star Marine Corps General Smedley Butler, who blew the whistle on the whole thing. And then from that point forward, Roosevelt, to his Knickerbocker friends, is like, well, you all did not manage to, the robber barons were admiring what Herr Hitler was doing in Germany at the time in the 1930s, and thought, well, we could have that happen here. We don't need to put up with this talk of us paying taxes, right? We could just have an authoritarian regime instead, right? It's Rosa Luxemburg quote, right? I think it's Rosa Luxemburg that said the choice is always between socialism and barbarism.
And so the robber barons were like, well, we can definitely make barbarism happen here. But then when they failed, Roosevelt was like, well, y'all are about to be tried for treason, or you're going to pay higher taxes. Those are your choices. And we all know, of course, they had to pay the higher taxes, but they never forgave or forgot. And so World War II comes and goes. And then the post-World War II era, these same old families are trying to figure out how they can reverse the New Deal, and reverse the New Deal is exactly what they've been doing since the 1970s. First you have, I already went through it, first you have the offshoring to foreign shores, the technology really permits that. You have the arrival of women in the workplace as envisioned by the CIA rather than as envisioned by any sort of hope for equality or equity. You just double the amount of workers. You double the supply of workers and the price collapses. The price of labor, wages collapses. Offshoring, already mentioned. Technology, you've got computers, spreadsheets, that replaces a huge amount of workers. And so you have the arrival of Reagan in the 1980s, which is now, that's the dawn of the neoliberal trickle-down economics, cut taxes for the wealthy, it's going to make us all rich ideology that has just bifurcated wealth in this country to like a status similar to the Roman Empire, right? A really grotesque wealth inequality. And then of course we've already been through 9/11 and the Patriot Act, and I did not mention the bank regulation, like the repeal of Glass-Steagall under the Clintons, right? One of their great contributions to our country was to totally deregulate the banks so they could run wild for 10 years, and within a decade they'd totally collapse the economy, only to be bailed out on the backs of all the rest of us, leading to the current bizarre situation we're in. And that is none of that is to even mention we mentioned neoliberal trickle-down economics. There's a neoconservative business of infinite wars to pump up the arms industries and all that. I mean, so after a decade of that, people were ready to vote for the Donald. This is what I mean when I say that the Donald is a symptom, of this much broader disease. And to bring it all back to like the Jeffrey Epstein thing, like I do think that it's like I remember sitting in Miss Homan's 4th grade class, and she was showing us a slideshow of the American invasion of like Utah Beach, in Normandy. One of these, she had some pictures of the invasion of Normandy. And I remember just feeling my heart swell with pride. That's right. America is the country. When someone tries to put their people in camps, we go over there and make sure that doesn't happen. Well, I mean, that's not really true, of course. And we put people in camps during World War II here in the United States, with the Japanese internment camps. And our own country is built on the conquest of the frontier, which is other people's territory, of course. But that was still the impression I had of America back in the early 90s, sitting in Miss Homan's 4th grade class. Do you have Miss Homan? Did she ever go through the Normandy beach invasion thing with you?
Man, I don't remember that in particular, but I did have Miss Homan.
Yeah. Well, what's happening now in Israel, where like this, you have this this government that calls itself a Jewish government, that is now committing a genocide. It feels like it. I don't see how that vision, like that understanding of ourselves, can possibly survive what's happening in Gaza. And you can just see the heartburn that America's struggling to deal with. We're like funding this insane genocide, and it doesn't match with our understanding of our own history. All of this makes World War II this blind corner that we can't see around. Like this version of America really started after World War II, and people don't know their Great Depression history. No one remembers the Gilded Age anymore. There's very few old timers around that lived through the Depression anymore these days, and it's odd. Like I think there's piles of evidence connecting Epstein to the Mossad, and there's piles of evidence connecting Ghislaine Maxwell's old man, Robert Maxwell, to the Mossad. And so it does seem like there is some power that exists above the Westphalian idea of America and the Westphalian idea of Israel that's calling the shots. The way that you can just look at the way that all of the internet censorship laws are being deployed across the world, or the way that the COVID regime was deployed in lockstep across world governments. There is clearly some kind of coordination here going on above the level of the Westphalian nation state. And so I think that really is the chessboard we find ourselves on. What's happening here is that everything that the middle class that was created by the New Deal has been, withdrawn, taken back, or that's in the process of happening. But we can't have people understand that, right? We don't want a broad understanding of that. We want the structures of power, the invisible structures of power that exist behind the veil of Oz that you were talking about a few minutes ago. In order to keep that thing hidden, we have to have major distractions, like the abortion debate. And man, I think that I don't know. The thing that chills me about human nature, and I am so guilty of this. I remember during COVID, there'd be a couple of rounds. You hear people with opinions you just didn't agree with, but it would be you're in a group of like a dozen people, and 10 of them are talking about how great COVID vaccines are, or with no appreciation from myocarditis or the potential side effects or trade-offs or any of those nuances, right? It's just like, no, you must have this drug. You must consume this product, or you're a bad person.
Herd immunity. Natural immunity. That's what I was trying to say.
Herd immunity is natural immunity, right? No contact with the fact that once you've had the chicken pox, you ain't getting the chicken pox again, right? So if you've had COVID recently, the idea of getting injected with a COVID vaccine is like not. I can't believe any medical professional would ever recommend such a thing. But when you're in a group setting, it's easier just to kind of shut up and keep your opinions to yourself, right? You don't want the group to turn on you. And that cowardice, which I myself am guilty of for sure, especially during the COVID era, that's chilling. Because that really is a useful element for the powers that be to maintain control and continue their program of fleecing us to a greater and greater extent each and every year that passes. There's an aspect here that I do want to bring up where like economic scarcity and hatred are linked, right? If there's not enough food and someone's babies aren't going to eat, this is what societies break down. Any kind of superficial differences, society will break down along those differences when you start to have conditions of economic scarcity, right? If someone's babies aren't going to eat, if you're going to feed your child, but then your neighbor's child's going to have to starve because of that, well, then you need to tell yourself a story about why your neighbor and his child or their child is subhuman or something, right? So you can not feel like a monster, even though you're just going down, just carrying out, you're just doing what would naturally come to you. In the movie Inferno, which is the third Da Vinci Code movie, it's also a book, the principal Heavy gives a speech. He wants to unleash a virus on the world that's going to kill half the population with an eye towards sustainability. And he gives this whole speech about this very thing. About the book is based on Dante's Inferno, one of my favorite pieces of literature. And his idea, what he's saying in the lecture is that if there's not enough food, what we will experience is the worst things, from Dante's Inferno, the worst things, the worst behavior. It will unleash hatred. It will fracture society. It'll be a total disaster. And so in order to avoid that, it's worth just killing half of us now to avoid what happens under conditions of economic scarcity. It really is scary when that happens, and I think we're feeling some of that now. It's like you don't necessarily need it. Propaganda is important to what's happening here. But there's also an element that when the more desperate people get, the more they turn on each other. The more we become, like crabs in a bucket. So that's definitely a factor here as well. I guess I just have one more anecdote here. I mentioned on here, Gary Stevenson from Gary's Economics, the Britisher who has up and gone to the London School of Economics, made himself a fortune, working for big banks and betting on commodity markets because he predicted that the governments and the poor are going to be bankrupted by the rich, who are a tiny minority, but sucking up more and more and more of England's wealth and Britain's wealth and in the American case, American wealth. Right? He last weekend released a podcast where he had been down to one of these immigration riots, demonstrations, protests, where there's two groups of people on one side of the road and another group on the other, and they're just screaming at each other with like teeth bared, real hatred and animosity. One group is like pro-immigrant and the other one is anti-immigrant, right? And the man, he got emotional. You could see Gary choking up, because it really hurt him in his soul or whatever to see the working class divided. Because Gary's diagnosis of the situation is that all we have to do is return to the New Deal tax regime. Oh, that's my words, not his, but he wants to soak the rich with taxes. And that so much of the problems deranging modern society, the reason that generations are locked out of the housing market, is that we haven't properly taxed the rich. And to see it, all you have to do is imagine what would happen if you hammered the rich with, New Deal-esque type taxes. What would happen? Well, they would be forced to, they don't work for a living, right? They get their living off owning property. And so if you jacked up their tax rate, they would have to divest some of that property in order to pay the taxes. And if you have the rich start divesting property en masse, like the Blackstone group comes readily to mind, if you hammered them with taxes, they would have to start unwinding their portfolio of investment properties, putting those things back on the market. You would have a glut of supply on the market, and you would see prices come back down, right? So the run up in housing prices is all due to the fact that we haven't properly taxed the rich. These people can't spend any more money on like consumption because they are already rich and they already consume, as much as they possibly can. And so when you give them extra money, all they do is go around the economy buying up assets, of course. What else are they going to spend their money on? They can't just leave your money in cash because it'll slowly get eroded by inflation. So they buy assets with their cash as a way of preserving it. And that's what drives up the cost of assets for the rest of us. And that's not just true of housing, it's true of like stock prices also, and classic cars, and fine artwork. All of these categories of things all have seen the same asset price inflation. So I don't know. I thought that was really, I think that ultimately that's what this Charlie Kirk thing is all about. Whether it's really just a lefty who's been driven mad by the insane takes on social media, or if it's part of a broader fugazi. I do feel like that's what's really going on here. They're trying to, the structures of power that exist behind the veil of Oz are trying to avoid having that happen. It's like we live in a democracy. It really is supposed to be one person, one vote, not $1, one vote. And that's a big problem for the oligarchy. So they're trying to preserve their existence. With these sideshows, that's what I think is really going on here. So I don't know, Brian, I think I'm going to try to be better about speaking up and not, when people say I get offhand comments that clearly the framing of the comment is that the Donald is the next Hitler and is a unique evil and is the summa of the problems facing American society today. I think what I'm going to try to do is personally resolve to not be cowardly in those situations and say, listen, voting for Kamala and voting for Trump is the same evil. You're voting for the same uniparty. You're voting for genocide in Gaza. There's no getting around it. You can't look down your nose on people that voted for the other party. We got to stop. We got to not let that pass in polite conversation anymore. Maybe that could be a way to turn down the temperature, because, man, I sure feel bad for Charlie Kirk and his wife and his 2 young kids.
Well, Catherine Fitz was saying how, maybe our reptilian overlords are planning a breakaway civilization with, 0-point technology. And all
you refer here to Catherine Austin Fitz, the former assistant director of housing and urban development under George H.W. Bush, of course.
Right. And so, she thinks they're developing a whole breakaway society, and of course, like $6 trillion went missing on September 10th back in 2001.
Another nice 9/11 tie-in, well done.
Yeah, and so maybe what can happen is our reptilian overlords can kind of have their breakaway civilization and up and leave, and then leave us to kind of rebuild the sheep farm, so to speak, in a way with reasonable taxation practices and whatnot.
I think they need us to clean their toilets and run their businesses and most importantly buy their products. I think that they need a certain amount of tax cattle, and so they're kind of stuck with us, I think. But it's interesting because you're right. Catherine Austin Fitz's idea is that the elite are fully aware of the Marxian idea that there's a countdown clock built into capitalism, and that they're busily constructing a parallel system to migrate us all into when that becomes apparent to everyone and can no longer be hidden or trod over or bullied out of people. You can't misdirect people away from the obvious dysfunction in the capitalist system for much longer. That's what she said anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the plan is really not to get into a spaceship and fly somewhere else, but just to perfect our imprisonment, and as they, so they can rule over us without question, or notions of fair taxation and things like that.
Well, I think that we gotta I think that the elites are buffoons. I don't think they have a lot of power and money, but that's all. They don't have the smarts that they think they have. And I think this whole thing is going to go tits up on them. And I think maybe a big part of that would be trying to enforce rules and polite conversation of saying, yeah, no, we're not going to. Well, I mean, I don't agree with the Donald's policies either, but we're not going to pretend that the Donald's worse or better than Kamala Harris. These two parties are both a disaster. And we either need to demand that the Democrats actually represent the working middle classes instead of pretending to, or we need a third party, and anything short of those two things, unacceptable.
Well, I mean, there's no reason why we can't demand the Republicans represent, working class as well. I mean, that's kind of what Donald Trump pretended to do.
Yeah, it was an act of political genius, recognizing that the Democrats had totally betrayed their base, and that that's completely unsustainable, and that you can seem like you're pro-working class, and that will be enough to rocket you to victory in 2 out of 3 elections, 3 out of 3 if you listen to the Donald. Man. Well, I think that part of screwing up the plans of the elites, part of making sure that we don't all fall into the trap that they're setting for us, is to try to be a better, try to say some of the things that I've articulated and you've articulated on this podcast, and not listen to it has to go the other way too. It's just that I hang out amongst liberal people, so it's always the Donald hate. But if you're among conservative people, it can't be lib hate either. We got to get rid of that. We've got to excise that tumor from our society, and we've got to recognize that people pulling the lever for Kamala Harris, even though I disagree with them, can't stand the side of Kamala. They are doing it because they think it will make America a better place, and so too are the people pulling the lever for the Donald. They're not bad people. They're great people on both sides. To quote that, what was that? The Fredericksburg, the Charlottesville hoax or whatever. The people pulling the lever for Kamala, great people. We shouldn't hate on them. The people pulling the lever for the Donald, great people. We shouldn't hate on them. We've got to start looking up. Right? Isn't that the name of that movie? Just Look Up, from a couple 3 years ago. Just look up, man. That would be the big takeaway from today's episode, in my view.
All right.
Well, I feel exhausted and sad. So definitely seems like a good place to leave it. So I will just say, everyone, come visit us over at systemfailure.org. We'd love to see you there. You can get in touch with either Brian or me on the About page. And by the way, sign up to receive my weekly essays in your inbox. I think you're going to love them. Okay, folks, have the best week you possibly can. We'll be back next week with another exciting edition of the System Failure Podcast.
All right, see ya.